YouTube? It's Rain, and I'll be going over the green and multicolor cards. So without any hesitation, let's get right into it. We have Alpine Grizzly. Not a fan. Dies to bears, dies to morph creatures, so just not going to play this. Archer's Parapet, I want to say that's pronounced. 0/5 wall with an attrition ability for 2. This should be okay. Sometimes make the cut, sometimes you'll side it in, depending on if you're green, black, and other factors. So yeah, that's a fine card. Awaken the Bear. It's green's combat trick, and I'm not the biggest fan of this. It should be a fine trick, but I'd rather be paying less mana for this sort of effect. So it's a little overcosted for what you get. Become Immense. So 6 mana, target creature gets +6/+6 until end of turn delve. How much am I willing to pay for this effect? At instant speed, I think I'd be willing to pay 3, so I have to exile 3 cards. It's a big commitment, but the effect can be really powerful in a lot of situations, so you have to consider it as one of the options for what you want to play with Delve. It's a fine one. Dragonscale boon, 3 into green. So this effect is like Savage Surge, except the bonus is permanent. You can surprise a lot of people with this. Be able to block with your big attacker and still attack with it. Abzan, especially the +1/+1 counter synergy, can give it stuff like First Strike and Lifelink and all that awesome stuff. So this should be a good trick, even at 4, which is a little pricier than I like my effects, but within the right deck, this will be very good. Feed the Clan, absolutely terrible card in 99% of circumstances, so just never ever ever play this card. Ever. Next is Hardened Scales. I like to think of this as like our training grounds for the set, and like the Outlast ability kind of reminds me of Level Up a bit. That said, it should be fine in the Outlast deck. I wouldn't play it if you weren't playing 7 or more ways to put counters on creatures, but if you do have that many ways, then this card should get you value in a game, so keep that in mind. Next we have Heir of the Wilds, one of the best 2-drops in the format. It has Death Touch, and it can start attacking him for 3, which means it's just great at opening. It's great when you're winning because it can swing for 3 as your 2-drop. It's great when you're losing because it's Death Touch, and it's great when everybody's at a standstill. You hold him back and he has Death Touch. So this is probably the best 2-drop in the format. I may be wrong about that, but just how good it is at all points in the game and in all situations is fantastic. Highland Game, 2 mana, 2/1. When he dies, he gains 2 life. Not very good at all. It's pretty bad. 2 mana, 2/1s that don't like do very good things. Gaining 2 life is almost irrelevant on a body like this. Pretty much unplayable unless you really need the 2-drop. Next we have Hooded Hydra, X and 2 green for a 0/0. You can read it, it's pretty long and extensive. It's a very, very, very powerful card in this format where if you're getting flooded, it's another way to siphon in your mana. It's resistant to removal. It's going to be able to be played turn 5 as a 5/5, so very, very powerful bomb. Hooting Mandrills, 5 and a green. How much am I willing to pay for a 4/4 trample? I'd like to pay 4 mana for that body in this format, but I wouldn't be too unhappy paying 5. So that's 1 or 2 cards to exile to make this card good. That's not an unreasonable cost, and even at 6, this is bad but not unplayable. I mean, so this guy's going to be fine. Incremental Growth, it's a reprint, 3 and 2 green for this absurdly powerful effect. It does require you to have 3 creatures, so keep that in mind. But having 3 creatures, as I've said in this format, isn't going to be very hard. And once you do have 3 creatures, this is just a tremendous blowout for the Abzan clan. 6 power on your dudes, adds effects to the board. Just ridiculous. So good. But keep in mind that this is not a May. So if you have 2 creatures, they have a creature, you're going to have to put a +1/+1 counter on their creature, then 2 and 3 on yours. Next we have Kintree Warden. It's a bit of an expensive regenerate ability, and I don't see much of a point in surprising your opponent with this morph ability, so most likely you're playing it as 1 mana, 1/1 that can regenerate. As I said, 2 mana is a little expensive though. If it was 1 mana to regenerate, I'd be happier playing this, but it's very expensive, so I'm less inclined to. Longshot Squad. This is a fantastic Outlast card. The Outlast is a bit middle of the road in terms of expensiveness, but this universal reach ability is very, very, very important against a lot of the clans. One of the problems with the Outlast mechanic is most of the Outlast guys are very much ground-centric creatures, the exception being the one that gives all your creatures with counters flying. But this not only is an efficiently costed body with Outlast, but it prevents a weakness that your deck could have to flyers at common. So keep in mind this card is very good. Meandering Towershell. Even against decks with islands, you're getting a 2.5 evasion damage a turn on average for a 5 mana creature. That is wholly unacceptable. There's a one that gets in for 3 consistently in blue for 5 mana. They can start getting in on turn 4. This guy is a very defensive creature. He's really bad at attacking, even if he gets the island walk off though. But if you need to just hold up the ground, win in the air somehow, he can play a role. Next is Naturalize. It's a sideboard card. Pretty easy sideboard decision as well. Next we have Pinewalker, 5 mana 5/5. I love it in 1 color. That's fantastic body. You can also morph it for the same cost. And if you choose to morph it and flip it up, he has an effect where he has a universal effect. If you flip up a morph guy, you get to untap a guy. But if you flip him up, you can also untap a guy and have this surprise effect. This is a great, great, great card. 5 mana 5/5 is fantastic. This universal sort of effect to get some extra value out of your morph guys is even better, so awesome. Next is Rattleclaw Mystic. So this is going to help you fix if you're trying to splash blue or red. It's better if you're playing 2 of the colors and splashing 1 of them, but even if you're like playing Abzan, this guy will be fine. He'll tap for green mana and then he'll tap for your splash colors. And when you flip him face up, you get to ramp up a bit, but I expect most of the time you'll be dropping him down for 2 unless you have some really impactful 6 drop in your hand that you just would feel like is ridiculous to be able to get out on turn 4. Next is Roar of the Challenge. This at sorcery speed is a little awkward because the indestructible isn't really a trick. You kind of have to play it and say, do you have anything? But you know, this sort of effect is actually really powerful if you get both of the effects off. So you say, hey, my big creature must be blocked by all your guys. I'll be able to force through a good like 8 damage. And on top of that, my guy's not going to die, and I'm probably going to be able to eat one of your guys. You can also put this on one of your early drops to force through with your late game drops. So this could be a finisher in certain decks, but at sorcery speed, it's a little vulnerable and a little easy to read and play around. Next is Sagu Archer, another reach guy. He's fairly overcosted, and his morph isn't going to have you play him any earlier. It's only there for the potential blowout of being able to have another defender against flyers. That said, I'm not going to be morphing this guy very much. If I'm playing him at all at a 2-5 reach for 5, that seems very, very pricey. It seems okay, but it seems very pricey. Next we have Savage Punch. 1 in a green, sorcery, target creature you control fights target creature you don't control, and if you have Ferocious, that creature gets a buff before it gets to fight the other creature. So this is 2 mana less than Hunt the Weak. It gets your guy +2/+2 before fighting instead of a 1/1 counter, which I consider better because the fighting portion of this card is more relevant than getting the counter afterwards. The counter has always been marginal to the ability to fight. So this should act as very good green removal. Even at sorcery speed, it's common, costs 2, and does good things, so very happy. Scout the Borders. So this is supposed to be a Delve Enabler. Now you can also grab a creature, like this card should be fine at enabling Delve because you don't actually lose card advantage. And if you need to grab a land, you can, the option's there, but most of the time you'll grab like a Delve creature and say, now I can enable it with the 4 cards that are now in my graveyard, so this should be fine. This is a good way to play more Delve cards. See the Unwritten, secretly not a Temur card despite the Temur symbol and the Ferocious keyword. This is a Sultai card, as it puts 6 or 7 cards into your graveyard depending on if you have Ferocious. And if you do have Ferocious, then all the better for you. This cheats into play Delve creatures that are normally overcosted. This also cheats into play potentially multiple Delve creatures, and it enables Delve for the rest of your deck too by saying, oh, suddenly I have 6 or 7 more cards in my graveyard. So this is a bomb in green, blue, black decks, and you have to consider it a lot more for the other decks because you're not going to be able to take advantage of the rest of the cards in your graveyard. You have to find out what on average you'll be hitting with this sort of card, how often you'll get Ferocious to make it a 2-for-1, and what 2 cards will you be hitting. Next is Seek the Horizon. Well, you want to read the sort of card and be like, oh, it's a 3-for-1. They're basic land cards. Even though that there's a lot of ways to use lands in this set, I'm just not sure. This might just be too slow, even for this set, to be good. But I may totally be wrong, because this will thin your deck from lands, get you better drops, help you hit your land drops, and you're not ever going to end up flooded in this deck, as I've said. There's just so many things to do with so much mana, so this might be a very good card. It takes some testing to find out. Smoke Teller, a bear that lets you peek down and face down creatures. Maybe. He's a fine 2-drop as a 2/2, and if you're playing blue you get a bit of upside, so maybe. That said, he can also like take a look at what he might be blocking. Because he has a 2/2, you're going to want to trade him off for Morph Guys, so he might just, the threat of this activation might stop Morph Guys from attacking depending on what they are. And if they are still attacking, you can usually assume that you're not going to want to block with this guy. So there's a little bit of intricacy with this card. Sultai Flare, gaining life isn't tremendous, but that's a lot of life, so, and on an ability that can happen pretty often. So it depends on your deck whether this is good or not. The body's not great, but the effect is okay. I don't know. I'm not a huge fan. Temur Charger, in my opinion, the third best in the cycle, simply as a 2-mana 3/1. This is going to be flipped up the least, but Oresco Swiftclaw, because Wizards reprints it every single chance they get, they seem to have a hard-on for this effect. It does have a little bit of upside in the late game though, so keep that in mind. Trail of Mystery. Now this is one that I've been debating a lot, and I have decided it will take some playtesting to decide if this is good. But I've made a general statement of this won't be that great. I mean, the first effect is good. It helps you hit your land drops when playing your morph guys to be sure you can flip them face up. Second effect is good too. It gives you a free combat trick on your morph guys when you flip them. I'm just not sure how many morph activations you're going to get in a game. It's going to be anywhere from 0 to 3, and if it's 0, this card does nothing. If it's 1, this card isn't worth the card, and if it's 2 or 3, then this card is worth the card, but I can't see it consistently being a good player in a deck. Tusk Colossus Don, that's another cool name. And it's a 6-mana, 6/5, just generic. Not good. This sort of body should have trample. I believe there was like Vulpine Goliath that was this body, and it had trample as well. I think it was common as well. So there's no reason they shouldn't have trample. And so he's just gonna get chump blocked and double blocked and just die. And I like his horns though. They're pretty cool. Tusk Guard Captain, 2/3s I'm a fan of because of how they block morph and how they block 4/4s with 2/2s. Cheap Outlast I'm a fan of. Trample on all my big guys I am a very big fan of. If you get cards like Incremental Growth, suddenly a lot of combat tricks that put counters on your creatures can start forcing through damage unexpectedly if they just want to chump block your big guy. Cheap Outlast. This is a very, very good card. Trample is a very nice one to give all your creatures. Or all your creatures with counters that are bigger. It just works very well. Windstorm, sideboard. Against, I think a lot of Sultai decks will be vulnerable to this, but there should be a few decks that just have a lot of flyers and you're like, I can't deal with flyers, so you put it in. Woolly Loxodon, 7-mana 6/7, doesn't have trample, disappointing. It can attack on turn 6 and surprise people as a 6/7 for 6. So there is that going for it. I just think it's a little slow and a little vanilla to want to play it. Next we get into the multicolor cards, and This might take a while, so keep that in mind as I get into this. Admonition of duel. It is a 6 mana 3/4 fire. Yeah. I haven't read this one yet, so give me a second. So he loots when he gets through. He costs one more than a 3/4 flyer probably should. Well, about a half more. But he does flip up on turn 5, get you a loot off, and is on curve. So you're probably going to be morphing this guy a good bit of the time, and if you can afford to morph this guy and flip him up on 5, he should be very good. Ascendancy is absolutely a bomb. Absolutely. With the amount of just random universal effects that you can get flying on all your creatures, you can get trample on all your creatures, you can get first strike on all your creatures, you can get reach on all your creatures. Just with this first effect alone, Abzan decks will be like, wow, all my creatures just got ridiculous. And this second effect is nothing to scoff at either. When I first saw this card in a vacuum, I thought this effect would be good enough to play this card alone, because the amount of flying power that you're going to get over a course of a game, especially a long game, is going to make this card give you like a 2-for-1 or a 3-for-1 over time with this effect. So this is nothing to scoff at either. I mean, you're mostly playing it for this +1/+1 counter effect, but great freaking card in Limited. Abzan Charm, probably just the best charm, especially in Limited. Acts as very, very good removal, acts as card advantage, acts as blowout dash combat trick potential. So you can even distribute 2 +1/+1 counters on 2 creatures, have the guy that gives creatures with counters flying, and then just start swinging. I mean, this charm is immense. You don't even have to have the Abzan clan to make this charm just a really great card to play. So this is actually very splashable too, if you're splashing one of the colors. Abzan Guide. This is one you're going to want to morph and swing with, as 5 mana 4/4 lifelink is lifelink actually becomes good when you start to get around the 4 power range. And this guy for 5 would be very good. At 6 it's a little slow, but he should be playable. And Afenza, a fantastic bomb. You can, with the amount of random universal effects, it's a little disappointing that you can't put the counter on her, but you can put the counter on something else and make combat really hard for your opponent, make your creatures bigger. You also have the advantage of preventing reanimation, as well as making Delve harder to play. So 3 mana 4/4 with those upsides is a bomb, absolutely. Ankle Shanker is not a bomb as much as you might like to think so. 2/2 is pretty easy to remove. There's some removal that gets pretty awkward against it, like Abzan Charm and Suspension Field. However, this guy is amazing when the board is even and when you're ahead, but he just is the worst card when you're behind, and for that reason, I just can't say he's a bomb. But if you're even or ahead, he becomes a bomb. If you're behind, he's just absolute trash as a 5 mana 2/2 with an irrelevant ability. Armament Core, 5 mana for a 4/4 with an obscenely strong ability. So what you should consider this is, if you remember Supply Line Cranes from back in, I want to say it was sometime in Theros block, it was a 3/5 that put a +1/+1, wait, sorry, it was a 2/4 flyer for 5 that put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. So you could say it was a 3/5 flyer with upside. Now this is a 6/6 for 5 with a tremendous upside, because these are +1/+1 counters and the +1/+1 counter clans, so you can start getting abilities out, you can start powering up creatures to attack, and just a 5 mana 6/6 is already great. So this card is amazing. Next is Avalanche Tusker. It's 2 in the Temur clan color, so green, blue, red. It's a 6/4, and when he attacks, he can force something to block it. I actually think this card is worse than Armament Core, even though Armament Core is uncommon. This is rare. This should be a good card, though, just because if they can't profitably attack into you, this guy starts acting as removal on a very important target you just need to take out and do 6 damage to. He's a creature, so he's a little more vulnerable to removal. And lastly but not leastly, look at this. Do you see the snake? This is a snake, guys. That's not a nose. That's a snake. And he's smiling. You will never unsee it. Just look at it. Next up, Bear's Companion. 2 and the Temur colors. So that's green, blue, red. This is a 2/2 into 4/4. Do not consider it a 6/6 for 5, unlike Armament Core, which is. A 4/4 is very good, and it just depends on how much you can take advantage of the 2/2 body. He blocks morph creatures really well, trades with them and gives you a 4/4. He's also a warrior, so actually this is like not the warrior clan at all, but I mean, this guy should be very, very good. Nothing insane, but very, very good. Next we have Butcher of the Horde, unquestionably a bomb, takes advantage of your early drops, incentivizes you to play more of them, and basically says you can actually play an aggressive deck with this guy because he's a 5/4 flyer that you can give haste to by just giving up one of your relevant guys and start getting it for 5 in the air on turn 4. If you need to race, you can sacrifice creatures, give him lifelink or vigilance, and this guy is insane and might be one of the only ways you can make a really good Mardu aggressive deck. But boy, when you do, that's scary. Next we have Chief of the Edge. Well, I would normally be more of a fan of this card than Chief of the Scale. I like 2/3s more than 3/2s in this format. However, this should be a very, very, very good card. It makes all your 1/1 warrior tokens 2/1s, which is better than 1/2s. And if you get like 2 of these, you can start actually considering if you're being told to play warrior tribal in Mardu or not. Just remember you want to have 7 warriors to make this sort of card good. Chief of the Scale, the counterpart, it's a 2/3 that gives other warrior creatures +0/+1. This effect isn't as good as +1/+0, however, I like the body tremendously in this format. It's not going to trade with morph creatures, it's going to be able to block really well, and it's going to give some of your other warriors some incremental value. So this guy is very good. Even on his own, it's just a 2/3 for 2, I would play him. So, very happy. Crackling Doom. Just random lightning striking everything. Does 2 damage to each opponent, and they sacrifice the creature with greatest power among creatures they control. At 3 different colored mana, I expect to be choosing what I kill. I'm very disappointed that I don't. A lot of the times I will be choosing the creature with the greatest power, but not all the time. This 2 damage to each opponent is hardly relevant and limited, so the fact that you're paying this cost and you can't even choose what you kill makes me very sad. Next we have Death Frenzy. It's, well, what can you say? It's 5 mana, kill all morph guys, you gain some life as incremental value, and if your opponent happens to be playing like Mardu, like Ankle Shanker, Zergo Housemaster, and you just let him through for a turn, Warrior Tribal with a bunch of tokens, Goblin Tribal with a bunch of tokens, like this card can become very, very great against a lot of decks. Against against most decks will have morph creatures. You just have to be careful with how many morph creatures you're playing with this. So keep that in mind. Deflecting Poem is awful. You can read it. It's not going to be good. I do think it has some implications about Eldrazi coming back in the third set of this block, but that's a little preeminent. Next is Doom Blast. This card is great. The problem with cards like in Garrick's Wake and Fated Intervention were that they weren't being cast in a lot of games. This format's slow enough where this card will be cast in most games, and for these cards, it's never about how much raw power they have. That's never been in question. It's being able to cast them, and with being able to cast them, you'll get a lot of raw power out of it. It is awkward in opening hands and doesn't do anything till turn 7, so note that, but it should just make most of your decks. A free Weapon Master. This is a card I'm a fan of. It's a 4/3 first strike, which would be enough for me to want to play it on its own for the morph cost. And the fact that he gets a little bit of a surprise, you can trade up one of your early guys, you can force through a little more damage.